rhinoceros got his skin, puppeteered by Amelia, Saba, and Emily. Once upon a time on an uninhabited island, there lived a Parsi and his friend Panda, and they lived in the rays of the sun in splendor. One fine day they took flour and water and currants and plum and sugar, and they made themselves a cake that was 2 feet across and 3 feet thick. They baked it till it was all done and brown, and it smelled most wonderful. But just as they were going to eat it, there came down to the beach one rhinoceros with a horn on his nose, 2 piggy eyes, and no manners at all. In those days, the rhinoceros's skin fitted him quite tight. There were no wrinkles in it anywhere. He had no manners then, and he has no manners now. So he went up to the panda and said, "How?" He went up to the Parsi and said, "How?" And so the Parsi was a little frightened and left the cake. He then climbed to the top of a palm tree, and his friend Panda hung out by the bottom of the palm tree. The rhinoceros then upset the oil stove with his nose, and the cake rolled onto the sand. He spiked that cake on the horn of his nose and ate it, and then he went away, waving his tail. The Parsi then came down from the palm tree, and with the panda, he put the stove back on its legs and recited the following words. "Them that takes our cakes, which Parsi man and panda bakes, makes dreadful mistakes." 5 weeks later, there was a heat wave in the Red Sea. Everybody took off all the clothes they had. The Parsi took off his hat, but the rhinoceros took off his skin and carried it over his shoulder as he came down to the beach to bathe. In those days, the rhinoceros's skin buttoned underneath with 3 buttons and looked waterproof. He said nothing whatsoever about the Parsi's cake because he had eaten it all, and he was rude. He waddled straight into the water and blew bubbles through his nose, leaving his skin conveniently on the beach. The Parsi came by with Panda and smiled a smile that ran all around his face 2 times. Then he danced 3 times around the rhino's skin with Panda and rubbed his hands. Then he went to his camp and filled his hat with cake crumbs, for the Parsi and the panda never ate anything but cake, and they never swept out their home. They took out that skin, and they shook that skin, and scrubbed that skin, and he rubbed that skin just as full of old, dry, stale, tickly cake crumbs as it could possibly hold. They rubbed it until the whole skin was full of cake crumbs, just while the rhinoceros wasn't looking. Then they both climbed back into the palm tree and waited for the rhinoceros to come out of the water and put it on. And then the rhinoceros did. He put on his skin. He buttoned it up with the 3 buttons, and it tickled like cake crumbs in bed. He wanted to scratch, but that made it worse. Then he laid down on the sands and rolled and rolled and rolled, and every time he rolled, the cake crumbs tickled him worse and worse. He kept rolling. Finally, he ran to the palm tree, and he rubbed and rubbed himself against it, as the panda hid behind it and giggled. He rubbed so much and so hard that he rubbed his skin into a great fold over his shoulders, and another fold underneath where the buttons used to be. He rubbed some more, and there were folds over his legs, and boy did it spoil his temper. But it didn't make the least difference to the cake crumbs. They were inside his skin and tickled evermore. So he went home, very angry indeed, and horribly scratchy. And from that day to this very day, every rhinoceros has great folds in his skin and a very bad temper, all account of the cake crumbs inside. Puppets, get back on stage and take a bow. The end.